As a Marine, I too have seen weird shit in the Marine Corps. By RevBlackRage. I was reading 035 Nun's post about his experiences with weird shit in the Marine Corps. Figured I might share some of my experiences, of which I have a few. This was back in 2006 or 2007. Our battalion was experiencing a rash of break-ins at our ramp. Ramp being a fancy term for a tactical parking lot, where we parked armored vehicles. Why would you break into the ramp? There was a maintenance bay with millions of dollars in tools and a bunch of high-speed training aids, like 70-inch televisions. This was in part of Camp Lejeune, known as Courthouse Bay. The history behind the name is that before the U.S. Marine Corps bought the land from North Carolina, the county courthouse was in that neck of the woods. The courthouse itself stood where the barracks were, and across the bay, where our ramp was, is where the gallows stood. A ramp guard was posted due to the thefts. Sets of 2 men on 8-hour shifts, plus a corporal of the guard, who wasn't on the ramp but up in the barracks. Me and my post buddy drew rifles and relieved the guys on guard. This was about 2200 or 10 at night. "Hey, stay frosty, the kid's out playing tonight," the COG passed along during relief. "The kid, Corporal?" "Whose kid?" He just grinned and said, "Call me if you need me." There were 2 positions in ramp guard, box guy and rover. Box guy sat in the Connex box next to the road. And the rover rovered the area. We weren't the only unit in the courthouse bay. At the time, there was a combat engineering school, MARSOC, a Coast Guard Special Operations Training Command, and Force Recon. We kept an eye on any assets they had on that side of the bay as a professional courtesy. I took the first walk around as the rover. That's when I got the first weirdness. I was walking back amongst our vehicles, and I kept hearing bangs from inside the vehicles, and occasionally what sounded like tools being thrown across the ramp. Never found anything when I went to look. Side note, the Marine Corps was always short on funds. It's like a service tradition, so when one of our vehicles gets blown up or sunk, the vehicle is recovered and anything salvageable is taken off the vehicle and put into rotation as spare parts or equipment. That sledgehammer with the weird scorch marks on the shaft, it was proud of the hands of a dead Marine who was holding onto it when the vehicle was blown up. That final drive, we pull out a supply that's got a weird pull to it when it drives. It was on that truck that sunk in the bay. The one that took 5 Marines to their death. There was always a joke about the vehicles being haunted, so I played it off. Wasn't going to call the corporal or the guard over for some nonsense. So I'm walking my post in a military manner, trying to keep the cold at bay, trying not to freak out at the same time. Walk around back to the box and took my turn as the guy in the box. About 15 minutes into my box rotation, my cell phone lights up. It's my watch buddy.
"Hey man, you're a fucking hoot, but that shit's creeping me out. Knock it off."
I asked him what the fuck he was talking about. He grunted over the phone and told me to knock it off and hung up. I looked at my phone, not knowing what the fuck he was talking about. I shrugged and shoved my phone back in my pocket. He came back around to the box 15 minutes later. "What the fuck are you talking about, man?" I bluntly asked him. Apparently he had heard a giggle when he was walking along the tree line on the far side of the ramp, like 2 or 3 times. I called him a retard, as people do in the military, and took my turn to walk. First place I went was the tree line, because I was planning on checking it out, and making fun of him for being a pussy. It was dark back there. The stars were bright. There was a full moon out. But back along that tree line was darker than shit. I was walking along it, not really paying attention, when I heard a twig snap inside the trees. I turned around and brought my rifle up. Bullshit guard on duty or not, there were still bears in North Carolina, and I didn't plan on getting eaten by one. I didn't know what a 5.56 would do to a black bear, but I had 30 chances to find out, and I wasn't willing to go on a journey of discovery. I looked into the trees directly in front of me. It was damn near pitch black. I started to get that creepy feeling you get when you're being watched, like the shadows were staring back. I backed up a few steps. Nothing happened. I waited a few more heartbeats, just staring at shadows with my rifle at the ready. That's when I caught movement. It was about 3 feet tall, maybe 4. But that's all I could make out. It stood looking in my direction for a few seconds, from about 10 feet inside the tree line. My eyes adjusted a little, and I could make out the vague outline of a person, a kid or a midget or something. It continued doing nothing, and just like that, it turned and moved off. Looked like I got about 3 feet and just fully disappeared into the shadows. Like ceased to exist type disappeared. I stood watching for a moment, trying to rationalize what I just seen. Hog, maybe? Recon guys fucking with us? That had happened before. There'd been a pretty bad rivalry between us and them. Not a professional one either, just 2 tribes of testosterone-charged guys in their early 20s. Tribal conflict was inevitable, but that was pretty chilled out now. Maybe I'd imagined it. Probably had. Nothing will fuck with you like your own imagination. I returned to my walking post, but kept glancing over my shoulder. I kept telling myself this was just my imagination and nothing more, nothing less. Couldn't shake it though. I made my way back to the box and did a turnover. My watch buddy seemed a little withdrawn, yet kind of wired, almost jumpy. I asked him if everything was all right. He told me he felt like he was being watched the entire time, and it was freaking him out. I told him about the shadow at the tree line. He looked at me with genuine fear in his eyes, and we agreed not to go back there again for the rest of the night. I offered him a smoke, and he took it. He mostly hung around within sight of the box during his rove. It came time to shift from box guy to rover. My buddy was a bundle of nerves, but I was still cool to rove. I had a loaded rifle and body armor, and at this point in my military career, I still thought I was invincible. So I went to rove. I wandered back down towards Motor T and the Coast Guard docks behind the building. That feeling of being watched popped up on my radar again. I looked out towards the concrete dock. Something was off, and I couldn't tell what it was. Until it moved. The top of what looked like a head dropped down beneath the edge of the closest dock. Looked like someone had been poking their head over the edge of the dock and was just watching me. I'd like to say I was a total badass here and raised my rifle and started ordering it into the light. I did no such thing. I stood frozen. A sort of fearful indecision stopping me in my tracks. I heard something splash out in the water just the far side of the dock I was watching. Something poked out in my mind. It was my duty to figure this out. It was my duty to walk out there and look down in that water. Another splash in the water. This time I could see water splashing up into the dock itself. The splashing was getting bigger. Like some fishermen had reeled in a shark with plenty of fight left in it. I did a brass check on my rifle and did my best to steady my nerves. I made a fist and knocked the chest of my body armor just to make sure it was still there. I was still religious at the time, so I may have muttered a prayer or two. I took one step forward, and I heard it. A sing-song giggle floating on the winter breeze. I heard it as soon as my boot hit the concrete. Nope. That was enough to dissuade me of any desire to look in that water. Some hard-ass Marine I was. I turned on my heels and booked it to the perceived safety of the Connex box. I think I ran the quarter mile to the box and, well, it may have not been a record, but it was fucking fast. As soon as I got there, I noticed the box was closed. I called out to my post buddy, and the doors of the box creaked open. I asked him what he was doing in there. He shrugged half-heartedly and said something about it feeling safer. I nodded. I understood. He asked me for a smoke, and I realized I needed one too. As I was fishing out my pack, I brought up calling the corporal at the guard.
Say what? Shit's creepy?
He shoots back, nerves in his voice. He had a point. I popped a smoke in my mouth and lit it. I held out my lighter to light his smoke. He leaned in, cigarette first, and froze just as it was about to light up, his eyes suddenly wide, staring over my shoulder. I sighed. I knew I was going to turn around and there was going to be some weird shit behind me. I remember thinking, let's get it over with. I turned around, and there was, in fact, some weird shit behind me. It was a child. A little girl, standing about 100 yards up and dead center of the road. She was dressed in a white dress, an older-style white dress, like the kind you see on the little girls in cowboy movies. If you're thinking something along the lines of the girl from The Ring, I'm sorry to disappoint, but she looked normal. Like she was pulled out of a Rockwell painting. Well, except for her eyes. Those were made of evil. I can't even describe them except to say they had no place in a child's head. When I looked into her eyes, I felt hate in my soul. It was fucking chilling. I once looked into the eyes of a Wahhabist jihad as he bled out from the chest. The amount of hate in his eyes was the only thing I ever seen that come close to that child's eyes. I looked at my buddy. He looked back at me. Neither of us knew what to do. We just knew this shit was wrong. The child started walking towards us. Oh, fuck. My buddy muttered breathlessly. And to be fair, that was a valid point at the time. The giggle floated across the wind again, but it didn't stop this time. It was like it was on loop, but each time it replayed, it was slightly different. At one point, it was a higher pitch. At another point, it was a lower pitch. Mixed with those eyes that never broke contact, it was very disconcerting. I was starting to get dizzy. As she moved closer, the edges of my vision started to dim and started pushing in towards the center. She was getting closer. I tried to bring up my rifle and drill the little shit right between those creepy-ass eyes, but my arms wouldn't cooperate. She came closer. I tried to move backwards, but my legs wouldn't play ball. She came closer. I tried to tell my buddy to get the fuck out of there, but my mouth wouldn't do its thing. She was almost there when I saw her turn down the street. Salvation rides in a 2003 Chevy passenger van. As soon as the headlights lit her up, she was gone, and I could move again. I demonstrated this by falling to my knees and gasping. I instantly felt like I had a motherfucking hangover. The van rolled up to us, the passenger door swung open. "You boots okay?" It was the corporal of the guard. I responded by vomiting. The COG chuckled. "I told you, the kid's out playing tonight."